Moments ago, that black smoke started to emerge from the chapel. You can see just a little bit of smoke still coming out of there, but we're watching it all closely, of course, and we'll keep you updated as we see more smoke a bit later on today. In the meantime, I do want to bring in who is now a good friend of the show here to help kind of break down all the latest developments. We have John Grosso, digital editor at the National Catholic Reporter. Thank you so much, as always, for taking the time to be here with us today.
Gosh, and what impeccable timing. Kudos to you.
Yeah, I was going to say it all happened right here live on the air. And John, you are a true expert and now a friend of the show. So what are your thoughts here as you look and you see that black smoke, meaning that no pope has been elected and we are left waiting for votes 4 and possibly 5?
Well, you know, the best part about being Catholic is the universal aspect of it. So I'm watching the smoke just like anybody else. And so this morning I had the Vatican media stream on, and they were surprised. Yesterday's delay, if you could call it that, of about 2 hours had us all kind of thinking, well, all right, at least we know now that the votes are going to be a little bit later. And so now 15 minutes theoretically early, I guess even us experts can still be surprised by the process. So I'm not surprised to see black smoke this early. It's the third vote, second and third vote. My expectation is by now, not being in the room, but sort of speculating that the candidates have emerged, that there's general consensus that is building. Usually that third vote is pretty pivotal. So not seeing the white smoke here is, I mean, it's always disappointing, but it's not surprising. I think what would be truly surprising is seeing black smoke this afternoon and then tomorrow morning. I think now with the fourth and fifth vote coming up, with I think Benedict was elected on the 4th and Francis on the 5th. There's now a lot of, I think, very serious expectation that we are coming to potentially the conclusion of this process. Now, whether or not that has any basis in reality is anybody's guess. But my first reaction was, I hope then this afternoon is successful, because otherwise it's another early morning for the two of us.
Yeah, for real, though, and I definitely appreciate you being here so early. One thing I did want to ask, because we're getting a lot of viewer questions that are coming in, and one of them here, are the Cardinals allowed to reveal to other people outside who they voted for and how close the vote itself was?
Well, it's a great question, and I never tire of any of these because there's so much intrigue into the conclave process. For me, I feel like it's a privilege that people are interested and want to know more. Cardinals are not allowed to reveal who they voted for. In fact, John Paul II's reforms in '96 to the election process actually took great pains to ensure that even handwriting on the ballots themselves was sort of disguised. He had mentioned that it needed to be legible, but done in such a way when you're writing your vote that it was you couldn't be identified by your handwriting for who you voted for. So generally, it's pretty frowned upon for a cardinal to share that vote. I mean, there's always sort of whispers that leak out. Sometimes the top 2 or 3 candidates, it'll emerge, that so-and-so was second in the running or third after the conclave, after many years after. But vote totals, specific votes, very, very rare for something like that to be published or publicized, especially after that vow of secrecy we saw yesterday.
I did want to ask you, because again, these viewer questions continue to come in real time here. Essentially, we're allowing people to just kind of vote and let us know, hey, what are you thinking? What questions do you want answered? And this one's actually from Barb S. over in Newark. She said, why is there a cardinal wearing a black outfit? What does it mean? Do you have any idea, any way that you can break that down for us?
Yes, it's a great question. And actually, it's funny. A lot of people have been asking that question because the ceremony yesterday, you saw really mostly men in red, except for I think it was 5 men that were in black. I guess the wise men outfit here. It's actually the Eastern Rite, Catholic. So there's the Latin Rite. That's the Pope is the patriarch for the Latin Rite. He's also the patriarch for the Universal Church. And then there's Eastern Rite Catholics that are Catholic, but the expression of their faith, of their liturgy, is different. They're still under the big tent, but it's different. And so when they were elevated to cardinal, they had to kind of contend with how do I incorporate red into the tradition of our specific church? And the Holy Father kind of not only allowed for that, but encouraged that sort of that expression in diversity. So there's probably more I can say about that, but that's off the top of my head. It's a pretty cool expression of the church's universality and diversity.
No, for sure. And I appreciate definitely getting that kind of feedback from you and, of course, answering these questions. And if there are anywhere you're like, I don't know this, obviously feel free to say that. But Roger V from Cape Coral, Florida saying, is this a marathon? Will there be sleep periods, bathroom breaks, eating? And I believe my understanding is that they actually went to get lunch right now and they do sleep overnight. But what can you tell us about that?
Yes, great questions. And I'm happy to do this. This is fun. Yes, it is a marathon. Yes, as you say, there are sleep periods. They're all staying at Casa San Marta, which is, stone's throw from the Sistine Chapel. They are eating. Actually, as you said, they're eating right now. On our website, ncronline.org, we have kind of a breakdown of almost even what they're served. They kind of get a modest breakfast before Conclave. They have a pretty modest lunch, a modest dinner. There's no hard liquor. There's very, very rarely dessert. So there are bathroom breaks. I don't believe that there are bathroom breaks during the actual voting process. I think that during the actual voting process, you're kind of locked in. That one I don't know for sure. But there are definitely pains taken to ensure that the humanity of this process is respected. But at the same time, it's certainly a marathon.
We're going to get one more in here just because, you said you love it. So we definitely want to get these answers. We do have John K., who asked, does a Catholic have to be a cardinal to be Pope?
Technically, no. You have to be a bishop. So there's actually in the College of Cardinals right now, they're all bishops except for one, Father Radcliffe. So if he is not commonly understood to be in the papabuli, but if he were to be elected, he would have to be a consecrated bishop before he would be allowed to become Pope. So technically, the Cardinals can elect anybody. They can elect people that aren't even in the room. That would be an extraordinary circumstance you and I would be talking about on a later show. They can elect someone by acclamation. There are very small, infrequently used protocols to elect others. But I would say 99.999% it's going to be a cardinal who's in that room.
John, we really appreciate you providing those answers here. I did want to go over some of the questions that we and other people still have, though, because with so many of the cardinal electors appointed by Pope Francis, how could that potentially influence really all of this?
Great. It's a good question. And I think it's sort of a twofold answer here. The first is Francis appointed just numbers, right? He appointed 80% of the cardinals that are in that room, picking his successors. So they kind of were appointed not because they shared a kind of an ideological or political stance with the late Holy Father, but because they were pastors in his image. They were shepherds. They were people that loved the poor and the marginalized and kind of were affiliated in that part of the church. Some of the cardinal electors that Pope Francis appointed would be kind of traditionally called conservative or progressive, but they all share the same trait. They're pastors. They love the poor. They're interested in a more inclusive, welcoming, synodal church. And then, of course, because I think we've talked about this before, but I think it certainly bears repeating, so I apologize, but the Pope Francis made such a dedicated effort to expand the college outside of Western Europe. And so just the fact that so many other cultures and identities and aspects of the church are now represented in the college, I think that influence alone could lead to very unexpected and perhaps, Holy Spirit-driven outcomes.
I also want to ask you this because this is one of the questions that so many people have asked over the past several days here. We've basically this list that does show who some of the quote-unquote front runners are. There are no candidates. You and I have discussed this in the past, but these are some of the names that have been thrown out. However, there is one American whose name has been thrown out as well. He's not on here, but could there ever be an American pope?
Oh, it's a good question. And I think this is probably the one that I've been getting from friends, family, you guys throughout this process here. Possibly, I think that if you were to ask someone that question 10 years ago, 20 years ago, it would have been sort of an unequivocal, absolutely not. The Cardinals do not want to invest America with more power. 1.4 billion Catholics in the world, and the United States being sort of the predominant power in the world. I think there was a lot of reticence to do that. Two candidates on our papabili list, Cardinal Prevost and Cardinal Tobin, are both American. I think that both have, I would say, maybe they're not the top of the top contender list, but I think that they're both legitimate, especially Cardinal Prevost. I think there is certainly a legitimate chance. And again, we don't know for absolute certain, but it has come out that Cardinal O'Malley did receive votes in a previous conclave and was a legitimate contender. Now, he was out of Boston. So I don't think we'll see an American Pope this time, but you just never know, either now or in the future.
All right, I want to do one more here because we're both enjoying it at this point. We do have this question from Kate, who says, if the Cardinals can't campaign for themselves, how do 2/3 of the Cardinals decide on a new pontiff?
Well, it's a good question. So they don't campaign, but as we sort of talked about yesterday, they do audition. So they whether they're in their titular church or past writings, they kind of talk about what their vision for the church is going to be. And after that first vote, maybe the first couple of votes, you start to see people coalesce around a candidate. And I think probably at that point, there's more than likely whispers or conversations that are happening in the background in between votes, perhaps deals, hard to say, wherein the different groups that are emerging start to kind of negotiate with one another or coalesce even further on a candidate. So it's really kind of an organic process. Catholics are usually we're kind of quick to hand wave that away and say, well, the Holy Spirit animates it, and that certainly is true. But a lot of the consensus is born out of the sort of the discussions and deliberations, like very kind of organically. So eventually, they do hit that 2/3 minimum here, or that 2/3 plus one minimum. It's a fascinating process, and one that a lot of my friends that are steeped in American elections are really confused by, because it's just so different.
And if you do want to submit some of your questions, just kind of scan that QR code right there on the top right-hand side of your screen, or go to livenow-from-fox.com/connect. We'll, of course, have these questions, and we're going to wait to see how this does play out over the next several hours and possibly several days, and whether I bother John Grosso again to make him join us and answer some of these questions. John, as always, thank you so much for taking the time to join us. We appreciate it.
Oh, thanks for having me, and you bother away. I'm enjoying our conversations very much.
That's what I like to hear. Have a good rest of your day.